Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming today. This is the biggest turnout by far that we've had for an Idea Café. I just want to make one housekeeping announcement at the beginning. After Emilio is finished speaking formally, then we'll have a group discussion, at which point there will be some microphones roaming around. We're video recording this, so we need to hear everybody's voice through a microphone so that it will pick up. And I'm going to turn it over to Jorge Sobron, who is a scientist at the Biodiversity Institute and one of the partners at the Commons.
Thank you very much, Emily. Thank you, all of you, for being here. My name is Jorge Sobron, as Emily said, and I am somehow associated to the Commons. The Commons is a space conceived and created and now run and protected by three of our institutions here at KU, the Museum of Natural History, the Spencer Museum of Arts, and the whole Center for the Humanities. This is a very exciting and interesting space. And I think it's probably one of the few or the less common in the university that actually gathers people from all the departments, all the disciplines together, which makes it for a very interesting experience. I have enjoyed tremendously every one of my participations here. Today, we have as our speaker, Emilio Chapela from Mexico. Emilio has a very interesting background because he began his life studying mathematics, and after several years of that, he decided that he wanted to do more, explore other areas of communication and move into communication, and got a degree on that. And later studied arts as well. So he has a very wide perspective on things. And the kind of work he has been doing is exploring ideas related to how books are treated, what do they mean, how are they going to disappear or perhaps not. He's going to talk about this. He has a number of, he has exposed in places like, well, in Berlin, he has one of his, he has his Gödel library being exposed in Berlin. He has also presented work in museums in Houston, in Florida, and of course in Mexico City. I look forward to your presentation, Emilio, and perhaps we can give him an applause too.
Okay, so I'm gonna be talking about and some of the ideas that I've been discussing and around a couple of projects that I've made regarding books. And I don't even know why I started like thinking about books and making these couple of projects that are their libraries. I mean, the one you're seeing, it's a library that it's in Mexico City right now, and it's books made of. They resemble books, but everything is made of wood. So in a sense, it's they're all possibilities of books that couldn't become books in a way. And well, this is another image of the same library. Some of the books, they have titles. Some of them, they don't. Sort of like potentially, some of them became closer to a book. This is it's part of the same project, but it's a different library. This library, I just finished this library, and it's being shown in Berlin right now. And for this specific library, every book has a title, and these titles came from a collective effort where I asked different people to suggest titles that represented impossibilities. And because for me it was important to make a library of books that would be really hard to exist as a paper. There's some images of the details of the books. And I'm gonna go back a little bit. And I've been working on this for 2 years, and I've shown the libraries in different moments. And I realized when I saw the books that the main purpose of the project wasn't the books themselves or the libraries or the shelves. It was about discussing, open the dialogue about books, because I feel like we are all really concerned about what's going to happen with books, and we all have a different opinion on that. So I decided to use the project as an excuse for dialogue, and that it's one of the things that that's what I'm here, I guess, and I'm trying to open the dialogue, and I'm gonna open it by laying out a couple of ideas that I've been thinking in all this project. I'm going to start with this. Umberto Eco says in a book that it's called "This is not the end of the book." It's a dialogue that he has, and he says that the book will not disappear because the book cannot be perfected anymore. It's like a fork. Like the fork is there, and it's very hard to perfect it. And I think he's right. I mean, I believe he's right. But I also believe that the book is not gonna get perfected, but it's gonna change. Everything is gonna change. It's not about the object. And so I think in this change, I like to think about a metaphor that for me it explains what is happening really good. Is thinking the book, the object, as the body and the text as the soul, and trying to follow this metaphor. What I think is happening is that the soul of the book is sort of, it's separating from the body, and it's also, in a way, ascending to the cloud. And it's not, I mean, we use the term cloud, and I think it helps the metaphor in thinking that books are sort of ascending to the clouds. And for me, the books, the object, will remain there in the shelves. Some of these libraries will become cemeteries of books, or at least the body of the books. And then in the cloud, I guess, we're gonna be, like be reading books that they're in a library in Harvard, or like a library digitalized by Google, and I do believe that the future of the text, at least, it's going to be there. And I do believe that it's going to be hard for the younger generations to I mean, they're not going to be reading paper books, I think. I don't know. I also, I think there's a resistance, I think, because we all love books, and we love the smell, but I think these discussions are not really deep. They remain in the superficial, I think, and a good example is thinking also about music. Music, in a way, it has been always on the clouds in a way. I mean, there's like a CD player, but that's only the tool. It's like the Kindle, and so like we're really used to that, and also how we listen to music today. It's mainly there, and we don't even question it. It's part of our lives, and so I guess will happen with books is that they will go from paper to air, in a sense. They will, you know. But I think so what's going to happen with the libraries? Will they become cemeteries? When they will become cemeteries? Or what's going to have to do the library to change in terms of to be updated? I think there's many ideas. You know, I think obviously now libraries are already moving towards organizing digital information. I mean, I'm not really sure, but I'm sure that there's a lot of this happening already. So I decided in a way to ask Google what libraries will become, I guess. And so this is whenever you search libraries are in Google, these are the suggestions based on the most frequent searches. So it's in a way, it's sort of like a glimpse to the collective unconsciousness, and I think it's well, it's pretty strong on what's going to happen. But really, to me, the real problem is the access. I mean, once Google or whoever finishes digitalizing most of the books, who will control the access to the information? I think that's the main question, and that's what I'm really concerned about. The Library of Congress has 22 million books around that. Google has scanned 20 million books so far, and they say that the world has 130 million unique books. This is an estimate made by Google, and they say that by 2020 they will have most of these books digitalized, 2020, and I mean there's many issues on the legal side which I don't understand, and there's like that's why we can't right now go on Google and see read these books because of copyright, and obviously it's a debate that it's happening right now. Who's going to control the access to these books? I think that Google is trying to sell back the access to the universities, the books that already were lended by Harvard, for example, to digitalize. So I think it's a really important question, and that's what I sort of want to open the discussion. Let's say that in 10 years, Google decides that it should censorship one title, and so that title will disappear for the entire. I mean, it would just disappear, or Amazon, or so. I think now it's the problem. It's the access of the information, and so well, thanks a lot, and hope you enjoy, and we can have a conversation on this. So.
Those came from Google. Those.
Yeah. Yeah, it's part of another work where I just look for things in Google and try to see what the unconscious, the collective unconscious is thinking. Yeah.
Frequency. I mean, libraries are obsolete. Is the first thing that comes.
Yeah, I mean, there's an algorithm in Google which is sort of a secret algorithm, but the idea is that it's based on the most frequent searches.
Very good, Emilio. I have 4 reactions. Actually, yeah, 4 reactions. I'll make them very quick. The first overall one is that I think we're dealing a problem with the construction of words and our use of words. The word library. nobody uses the word library. We use cloud, except the cloud is a library. We think of libraries as having to have the physical objects with the text as the soul. We don't apply the word library to other things. And I find it interesting that companies are using the words cloud, and Microsoft uses, what do they use, SkyDrive? It's, in a strange way, I think it's a notion that all knowledge is up in the heavens with God. You know, we don't say, there's no storage archive that is, uses the term below ground or, you know, geologic pits. We use SkyDrive. Okay, but the 4 points are this. If books are physical objects and the text is a soul, maybe we should invoke at least the Christian metaphor and the metaphor of other religions, that is the soul that needs to be preserved and protected and made available and evolved, and we don't care about the physical object. And I say this as a director of an institution that has 10 million physical objects, you know, in the Natural History Museum. Second, I think there are different degrees of impermanence. Books are thought of as permanent, but that's not true. Books are as impermanent as the digital archives, just in a different way, unless they're printed on terrific, you know, acid-free paper and using the best of inks. But even then, fires can famously consume them. We have archives. Books represent static knowledge at a certain point. And it's a lot hard to evolve a book. You need another book to replace the old book or device. Whereas Wikipedias and ebooks are much more easily evolved. So the knowledge is always fresh. And the backups of those books are always that time-dependent archive, an equivalent to a published book. Ebooks and Wikipedias are, I think, the best of the democratization of knowledge. Books, and this applies to the affordability of books. Books are much less affordable to the poor and the disadvantaged than, say, ebooks might be. For example, a radical idea might be, instead of expanding the Lawrence Public Library to the cost of $15 million, buy every Lawrencian an iPad. And they have access to not only all the books there that have been digitized and journals, but everything else in the world. I'll stop
there. Yeah, I don't know if I shouldn't pick up on the, yeah. I guess I'm thinking that it's very different in the discussions I had about books, and I feel like in Mexico where I've had discussions like this, there's much more resistance than other places, or maybe in a university group where you think that you would have more reaction, even, you know, for this nostalgia, you know, and to books. So it's just, I mean, yeah, just that thought came to my mind, you know. Yeah.
I think the censorship issue is the real critical one. That is the real.
Yeah.
The libraries do censorship. School libraries, on the pressure of school boards, about having books that have sex in them or evolution in them, for example, are being censored everywhere, being removed from the library. Franny and Zoe is a famous book that is removed from most libraries, many libraries in the United States. But that's here and there. The potential for a 1984 kind of censorship of the world's knowledge, that, I think, is the frightening one. And that's the one you raised, I think, is superb.
Yeah.
I had two thoughts, some of them overlapping, and I'll just throw them out. One of them is a little more far-reaching. But in thinking of the body of the book, it is possible to frame things in a developmental sense where the body has been changing and capabilities have been increasing, in that scrolls replace tablets and books replace scrolls, and at one point books did not have table of content or appendices. These were relatively recent inventions, and they began to facilitate a hyper navigation through the book via the index, and then hypertext realizes hyper-navigation at another level. And in this sense, the Kindle is a new body of the book, very hyper, and the content can shift. The second idea, it's a disconnect from the first, is that there may be a future, not too far distant, where it is not the content, the soul, but an overview of souls. As a researcher, I frequently, when approaching a topic, will not reach for the original work, but for a meta-analysis or a review as my introduction. And at the point where things are digitized, Google's great-great-great-grandchild, perhaps artificially intelligent, may present a view over an entire library and provide a summary akin to the meta-analysis. If you think of relational databases today, very few users go to individual tables and look at them. We look at views, which are the tables hashed together in various interpretable and usable ways. And so access may not become a question of who can get to the information or who can censor it, but who has the better software to provide the view. And if my viewing software is better than yours, it would be like my advantage better than yours. So these are two ideas that I think are interesting counterpoints to the topic you introduced. I just put them out there.
That's a nice dovetail to what I was going to respond to the gentleman from the Natural History Museum. I wonder, this idea of sort of a glorified notion of equal access and level playing fields, and this all sounds very wonderful, but kind of dovetailing back from there, back to your comment about moving away from physical objects and the fetishization of physical objects into, dissemination of information through wikis and through ebooks and things like that. I wonder, we have so many wonderful programs right now that are trying to transition these physical objects into places, countries, areas that do not necessarily have physical objects, right? So it still keeps that stratification there, but is moving towards an idea of egalitarianism of knowledge and so on and so forth. I can see a potential problem with shifting first world, upper middle class, Western civilization, kind of, all that nomenclature that goes with that, as them being like, okay, well, we're gonna go run with this, and we'll just give you the rest of the stuff that we have, and you just hang on, and then we'll bring you up, we'll bring you up behind. And I don't know if that's part of a teleology or trajectory of progress that needs to transpire to make something happen. So I really throw that out as something to think about ideologically. Is it going to be, well, we'll take this stuff and you let us do it and we'll figure it out, and then you just take this for now and then we'll bring you up to speed when time comes to pass. So are these palliative measures, are they really forward thinking? To whose benefit, and for what reasons? But I think this is a really good discussion, so thanks.
I was going to comment, following up on Chris's remark, that libraries aren't just repositories of information, but they're physical places that we go for multiple reasons, a lot of which is community. I think that's the reason that we're remodeling the Lawrence Public Library, especially if you have children. You take them to the library as a place that's a celebration of books and reading and information and learning. And I don't think that's probably going to go away, nor should it. And maybe I'm going to be the nostalgic one here. The other thing that I've noticed a lot in my research is in Latin America that I've been working on poetry, and a lot of the poets that I see are taking advantage of digital technology and getting outside of the book in order to reinsert the voice, which you can do now via the internet and digital access. But at the same time, I see a whole other set of poets who are creating books that are objects, that are art objects, paying a lot of attention to how the book is structured so that you have this kind of dichotomy between away from the book, no books, voice, this emphasis on voice that you can get back to in poetry, and then you see books that are art objects, that are beautiful things in limited editions that pay a lot of attention to typeface as well as illustration and other features that you can include, which could be scanned and put onto the internet or into a virtual repository as well, but that often aren't meant to be that. They're meant to be something else. So it's a way of sort of reintroducing the aura into the book by making them into art objects.
Yeah, I think, definitely, I mean, I work with physical things in art and with aura, and so at the end, I believe strongly in that, and that the library should become, or is, and should keep on being this space of community, and yeah, I totally agree.
I would like to ask you to explain a little bit about your piece where you said there were impossible books. Could you explain what you mean by that and maybe give us some examples?
Yeah. I guess I must confess that I was being a little naive when I first thought about the idea of making impossible books. And because I was thinking about books maybe so abstract that or so pretentious that couldn't be books in like the book of beauty or the book of truth, you know. And I decided that it was important for the library to have different ways of thinking. That if I chose all the titles, it was going to be sort of like boring, and so I invited a lot of people with saying like, oh, think from your point of view, like a book that would be really hard to exist. And so the surprise was that this was like really, really open but rich at the same time titles. I mean, some of them, they were like very literal. The contradiction was very literal. And other ones, they were just like more poetic, like the book of trees, like just like that, you know, or I mean, so at the end, they become not impossibilities, but more like desires, and yeah. So people, the book, they wanted to sort of write or read, you know, but pretty much you can't, you know, in that library. So they just like they're like suggestions of books, yeah.
There are a couple of things I'd like to address. Number one, I find a little bit of irony in the fact that this conversation is talking about the democratization of information, because the history of the book and the development of the Gutenberg Bible did the exact same thing, where it allowed books to become available for people other than kings and popes, and for information to exist in the broader context of the population. And so in some way what's happening now just follows the next wave of that. That's just one thought in response to what other people are saying. Also, I'm also a visual artist, and I'd like to follow up on the comment about poetry and how books are being used in different ways. That a lot of artists are essentially deconstructing the notion of what a book is, breaking it apart, thinking about what it represents, and reusing that notion in a less literal way than actually making a traditional artist book, and I think that's something very interesting that's been continuing to happen in the creative world.
Yeah, and I think it will continue, no? But I guess what I right now feel really important is the first thing you said about sort of like how this next step towards democratization of books, and that's why it's so important the question of the access. You know, like that's why it's so important, because if this access is going to be controlled by a vertical sort of like, I mean, I think the main question here is how do we make horizontal regulations, or how do we control the access to information? And I think that's the main issue. Before, you know, going back to the books and during the Second World War, I mean, the act of censorship was in my opinion, an act of staging. You know, like symbolically. I mean, the idea wasn't to disappear all the books. You know, it was just the staging and sort of like symbolically burning. And I think today, I mean, we're gonna be facing this kind of, I don't know if it's gonna be staged or it's gonna be real. I mean, I don't know. Yeah.
So just a bit of a thought, kind of in a bigger perspective, trying to talk about both books and libraries. Thinking about books, go all the way back, and I'm thinking about the real origin being some improvisational storytelling, where, you know, Sarah Lynn gets inspired and one time gives a performance, essentially. And if you weren't there that moment, that time, you can never see it again. And then a step away from that is maybe a manuscript, where one copy exists, but many people at many times can go to the Spencer Research Library and see it. We move from there, here's the Gutenberg Bible comment, where all of a sudden there are hundreds or thousands of copies, but you still have to go and see it. And then we come into the Kindle world, where essentially it's free, but Amazon is still sticking us up for $10. Probably within a decade or a half a decade, those ebooks will just be free, or will be so trivially expensive that we don't worry about it. And so everybody can have a copy. And Kristalka can sit here with his iPad and look at his copy, and you know, each of us can have a copy of each book that's out there. So that's books and their whole spectrum, but what about libraries? Now I was thinking about TV. When I was a kid, there was one channel and one program, and so my family would come together around that. And now there are 200 channels, and you can bounce around very quickly if you have the remote control. And so TV becomes a very personal experience. I can't stand it in my house because one of the kids will grab the remote and bounce around according to his or her desires of the moment. And it becomes a very intense experience for him or her, but it leaves me out. Now imagine that we each have our iPads and we're each experiencing whatever it is we want to experience in the moment. So what do we lose? We lose the interaction, and that's the library as a place where, and you can see this reworking of the concept of a library here at KU, it's a place, it's an information center, even if we don't have to go to the library to get that experience. And so that I think is the challenge of what should a library be and what should a book be into the future. There's got to be something that brings us together in some sense and makes us interact, because otherwise we're all just going to go and sit in our offices or our bedrooms or wherever and experience our own media at our own rates, and we're going to become a completely asocial society.
No? Yeah, okay. So I find, for example, there are a couple of volumes I have to confess that I own as an audiobook and as a Kindle book and as an actual paperback. And I'm getting sensitized to the fact that the experience is very different in each one of these media. And I guess I would love, if there's a cognitive psychologist in the group, to hear if we know anything about the different kinds of learning, the different kinds of memory and insight that we get from these different modes of ingesting information that is in the form of written word. For example, I think I've heard theories that learning that involves handling, tactile involvement with something can be more amplified or effective than a much more passive form of learning. And maybe that's a generational thing. Maybe that will become no longer a psychological fact, if it even is now, I don't know. But I'd be very interested to know if there are any insights to be gained from the different qualities of experience, from these different ways of getting words into our head. And I don't have an answer, so if someone does, that would be great to hear.
I was thinking about the whole issue of how the relationship between the book as a body and the library as a place, and these sentient experiences that somehow do make memory, and in several different ways, and the challenge that I would like to hear you address is I can't imagine separating the soul from the body as an artistic perspective. So, what are you thinking?
I don't know. I guess it's. I think
because the artwork is both.
Yeah. I think for the project, the idea is that I mean, it's definitely a challenge because the books you see there, in my putting it in the terms that I've been talking, they're like books with no soul at the end. They're just like bodies, what remained, and I guess I think I'm not trying to separate them, the books, but seeing the library as a place, as a soul, as a new soul. The entire libraries are for debate. They're for these things that we've been saying. So I think the artwork really is not related with the book and losing of its soul. It's like making this library that I was born sort of dead in a way, becoming this library alive and thinking that even if the library it's full of books that nobody consult anymore, like I'm sure there'll be thousands of books in the library that they're just there on 20 years nobody has like see them. So even if the books stay there, the idea is to make the library alive and yeah, to think about the soul of the library.
You mentioned an idea about all this text is in the cloud somehow, but people don't consult randomly things. There are filters, there are portions that are much more often visited. And you said something about getting a glimpse of the collective mind by looking at those portions or parts of all this almost infinite, well, not really, but very large set of ideas and connected thoughts. people are looking already at them and not in a random way. And I know that you have been exploring that by using some of the Google tools or Twitter tools. Can you tell us a little bit about that? What do you see? What kinds of parts people are exploring?
Yeah, I think we come to the same concern that I have. I mean, we tend to access this information, and it has to do with the software comment through Google algorithm. So this pretty much this information is organized by what Google is deciding. So I think that's a little bit scary, and so it's definitely not random. And these new books, then Google, whenever we can go and see them, it's not going to be random. It's going to be definitely organized. Maybe Google's going to say it's an algorithm. It's not. I mean, I'm not making any decisions. It's just the algorithm. But could be sort of tricky.
I was struck by one of the Google search phrases, libraries are socialist. In many ways, I think libraries could be said to be the main example, and a very wonderful example, of use right as distinct from property right. We can all go use what is there. As a slight aside, I was always surprised when my Marxist friends in college would occasionally steal from the university library. I used to suggest that they were converting a use right into a property right, and wasn't that somewhat ideologically confused? Again, as an aside, as academics, I think we all have offices stuffed full of books which, again, they're property, they're not really use rights. We might occasionally loan one out, but on the whole, every office on this campus is sitting there with masses of books in them, which only we really have any right to use. So the key for me, I think, is how do we move away from the concrete material library to the virtual library and maintain, if not increase, use right. Increase the socialism, in a sense, within the entire book world.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, definitely. I mean, and that's why it's important now the access. I believe that you buy a book on Amazon, you have the right to read it. You know, that you don't own. You own the right to read it, and I think we have to do two things. One is understanding more in the right to read, and then trying to regulate how, if that's free, if we can all go and have the rights to read it, because that's the other thing.
So one of the problems with declaring either books or libraries dead is we are jumping on technology that is so primitive that it is not usable. So it's fine to scan things for archival purposes, and I love to read my Nook on a transatlantic flight, but I can't imagine browsing a technical book that way. Somebody mentioned hyperlinking. Well, it's hard enough to get a decent index. To hyperlink something in a way that's usable to a human requires incredible effort. And we can't search images. So there's nothing that approaches walking down a stack of books and browsing things and pulling them off and flipping through and usually using your mind to visually search for images and diagrams. We're just not there yet and won't be for a very long time.
So I'm going to raise the temperature here. Let's talk about libraries. Libraries are not social phenomena. They're not socialism. I was taken to a library to keep quiet. You don't interact in libraries. You couldn't discuss ideas in libraries. They were not places for the intellectual exchange, for the information that you were browsing or pulling off the shelf. You could talk about it when you left the library, right? Okay.
That's your experience of your library. That's not all libraries.
Correct, correct. So if libraries now want to transition and reinvent themselves into YMCAs or social clubs, then they truly have to reinvent themselves. Second, and much more importantly, I think, well, there are in many less developed countries, there are no libraries in most cities and in most of the villages, whereas they can have access to all of this knowledge, which is the true democratization of knowledge. I think it's terrific for people all over the world to be able to leapfrog this necessity of hanging on to a body. So let's transition to the body. In some cases, you need a body to have the knowledge in works of art, in Natural History Museum specimens, and there are many other examples. But, and here Descartes was wrong. You needed the body to have the mind, the knowledge. But when it comes to books, the body is irrelevant. You've shown that in your work of art. You have a block of wood and it has nothing in it. But the knowledge is still out there. You can call the block of wood Shakespeare, but the knowledge is on the web and you can access it and you can read it on your Kindle or whatever. Books, you don't need the body. The body is a passing vessel for the knowledge. One can imagine the same discussion occurring when we went from somebody said tablets to the Gutenberg. When the people who were chiseling in the tablet would saying, oh my God, they're taking away my body. There's no body in the Gutenberg. What is the body? Because paper then was probably not considered the body, because it was a lot more ephemeral than a tablet. And now we think books or technology is a lot more ephemeral than the book. Well, it really isn't. It really isn't. It's just how we talk about these things.
So I actually have some relation to both of your comments, I think. I was going to ask in maybe a less incendiary way about what people thought libraries might become if books truly did die. So like once the last book rots off the shelf, will we lose all funding for all libraries forever because we don't need them anymore? Or will they change into community centers or computer access ports? Or what do we think that libraries are migrating into? Because I know a lot of the work that we do here at the KU libraries is in digitization, is in helping students with their computer access and with, managing files and with adapting their texts and writing and things like that. And so I'm sort of curious about what everyone thinks the next evolution of the library is. And then I think I'm also sort of curious as to what will happen to the books that exist and whether books are still going to be published even as everybody says they're becoming obsolete. Because people still publish a lot of stuff. And I think that's important. And I think that books, even though the information may be available without having the physical object, I think that the physical object has information included in it that isn't the text that's involved in the body. That's an anthropological object, if nothing else. So I'm just kind of curious as to everybody's thoughts on that stuff.
Trying to come up with two things here. One relates to what the library will become, and maybe it's a different analogy to the browsing issue. It occurs to me that with search engines, you can be very specific about, I want information about eastern bluebirds in a certain county in a certain decade, and the search engine will take you right to that and will not show you the forest, nor the trees, nor the dirt underfoot, or the bird right next to the eastern bluebird, or the corpse of the suicidal jogger over there under the bush. And maybe the analogy for the library is, on an idea basis, a seashore with flotsam and jetsam, or a rainforest, or someplace where you go to see more than what you were looking for, or to see how things are when they're next to other things. I'm all about browsing. I also work over at the research library, and my second point has to do with this technology, both proprietary and otherwise. We have a lot of forward-looking technology. I'm waiting for the one that can read a damn floppy disk. We're filing stuff that is fundamentally gone until someone invents the read anything machine, where we can stick the 8-track tape in, or that 1-inch Japanese video. We have 1-inch Japanese video. Who knows what's on it? It's gone. I know there's an example that the data from NASA's Viking Mars lander is not accessible. It's all been digitized in a hardware that's no longer available, or that you have to do some sort of steampunk revival of a technology to get the data off of it. So our vulnerabilities to hardware and software, and the fact that they tend to look forward and are really lousy at looking backward, I think are serious impediments to this. Now, as I get older, I delight in the idea that ebooks allow me to change the font in the damn thing I'm reading. You know, there are some mechanical advantages here. You know, there are those books with teeny tiny fonts that I was never going to read, that maybe there's a chance I will get to. But I think some of what we're using to inform our technological decisions, software and hardware, have to be done with a broader committee, shall we say, and done looking backward as well as forward and sideways and through a really tiny, tiny tunnel.
Perhaps we may have a couple more questions.
So, in talking about what do we want our library to be, that the space we're in right now is the library I want. And Chris talked brought up a good point of what kind of language do we want to use to describe a building. Is it cloud, or is it library, or something like this? But coming here to a discussion where we've got well-educated people from all backgrounds, from around the world. We've got a guest speaker from abroad, and being able to come here. We don't have any books on the shelves, but we've got internet access, and I see people on their tablets, and we've got the information here, and now we're spreading the ideas. So.
Hello. I just want to raise one point saying, I mean, most of the views we heard here were like from what the latest terminology refers as digital immigrants. I mean, we are not talking of what digital citizens feel, who were born after, say, 85 or 90, and they were always born with computers and tablets around, and they don't have this difficulty of how do I browse or how do I look for something, and they don't need help with that. And what are actually their perspectives? Do they really, if they really care for books, books will definitely remain. But if they are the people who are going to use 20, 30, 40 years down the line, and if they don't care for books, I'm sure everyone will be only going to read the hypertext and have all the facilities of clicking on index to go to the chapter and things like that. Like my personal experience, I was talking to some of the students who are just starting their career in programming. I always used to kind of go for the manual for that particular language and go through it first. I always used to have a reference book to write any program. Today they say, no, we don't even look at the book. We just go on the internet, and on certain website, we just get code snippets. We just copy, paste that, and change a little bit here and there, and our application is running. So, I mean, this is way in most of the things the data is going to change. I mean, I still know the botanists who used to go to herbarium, sit there and note down where each particular plant was seen. Today, you just go on a website like GBIF and download all the data, decide which one you want to use, and start using that. You don't really go and look at how that plant looks and where exactly it was collected. And again, 100 years back, the place was different, and you don't even have a clue where it was. So, I mean, we basically need to look at if we need to retain libraries. Do we really need to retain libraries? Are our kids going to use it or not? I mean, what's the point otherwise? Just trying to retain something which is not going to be used.
Okay, well, thank you very much to all of you for a very rich discussion and participation, and thank you very much for Emilio for having traveled all the way here.
Thanks for the invitation.